Hello, this is Judy, and for the next hour, I will be reading from the May 11th, 2026 issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. I will do my best to pronounce all names and words correctly, yet please forgive me if I do not. And here's our first article. It's a Star exclusive. And the title is Numerous Failure Controls and Noncompliance. With the audit of Conestoga College found that prompted the province to take it over. Excuse me. The damning details in a recent confidential two-part audit of the Kitchener Area College rate the school as high risk, according to executive summaries obtained by the Star. And this article is written by Kristen Ruscovy, and that's Rushowy, who is a senior writer. Conestoga College handed out pay raises with no justification, awarded contracts to higher bidders without explanation, allowed an executive to take part in recruiting their daughter into a management position, and had such poor oversight of procurements and purchase orders that one for $11,000 was recorded at $126 billion and no one noticed. These are among the damning details contained in a recent confidential two-part audit of the Kitchener Area College that rates the school as high risk, according to executive summaries obtained by the Star. The provincial auditors also recommend the college recalculate a controversial retirement package for former longtime president John Tibbetts, and that's Tibbits, estimated at around $4 million, and obtain legal advice to assess whether an overpayment occurred and determine appropriate remediation. The auditor's findings, submitted to the government in January and April, prompted Colleges and Universities Minister Nolan Quinn last week to fire the Board of Governors and appoint a supervisor to run the school. While the college has rules around expenses and procurements, as well as a Board of Governors with defined roles, our audit identified pervasive noncompliance with public sector requirements and Conestoga policies, one of the summary states. Our audit identified numerous control failures that collectively diminished transparency to stakeholders, weakened the college's ability to demonstrate prudent stewardship and value for money, and increase the risk for fraud. Phase 2 found that Conestoga had significant control weaknesses in executive comprehension governance, hiring practices, and related oversight processes, and significant noncompliance with public sector salary laws, with auditors blaming the most significant issues on negligent oversight by senior leaders and the Board of Governors. Last Thursday, in a first for Ontario, the government sacked the college boards and appointed Linda Franklin, the former longtime president and CEO of Colleges Ontario, to be its administrator. Quinn has told reporters that Tibbetts' 55% salary increase over 2 years, hitting a high of $636,000, making him the highest paid in the sector, was egregious and prompted the audit, which then uncovered numerous areas of concern. Conestoga had come under heavy criticism for its massive growth in international students in recent years and was blamed in part for the federal government cutting back on its numbers. At one point, the college had the most foreign students of any post-secondary institution in the country. The audit notes that in 2023-24, the college had a surplus of $251 million and a $121 million surplus in 2024-25. But amid a 62% drop in international students, it was projecting a deficit this school year, and it warns that colleges in general are grappling with reductions in revenue that could create potential fiscal exposure for the province. Conestoga also had implemented the deepest job cuts out of all the Ontario colleges, with about 550 layoffs in the last year alone, and the local union estimates a total of 2,700 losses in the past couple of years. The auditor's findings touch on several areas, and they note lax controls over purchase orders, including one valued at $11,000 was recorded at $126 billion, and another valued at $15,000 recorded as $261 million. Both errors remained uncorrected and open at the time of our audit, indicating significant weaknesses in purchase order review and approval processes. One audit summary states, this efficiency increases the risk of overpayments to vendors, spending beyond approved limits, plus heightened exposure to fraud or misappropriations due to the lack of effective oversight. The orders were corrected after the provincial auditors pointed them out. In procurements, the college provided no documented rationale for higher price vendor selection, as high was $57,240 compared to the lowest bid of $45,000, the auditor said, and in one case work began before a contract was in place. As for travel and food expenses by senior staffers, pre-approvals were missing, inconsistent, retroactive, and undocumented, along with selection of premium accommodations without required approvals and supporting documentation, including a $23,000 trip to Italy. They also found prohibited claims for alcohol, including a $1,300 dinner for Conestoga executives where drinks comprised about half the bill. On the job front, they found candidates were sourced through informal referrals. An executive who didn't declare a conflict in their daughter's recruitment and eventual hiring, and urged the college to implement a formal recruitment process that includes public postings, structured evaluation criteria, and documented rationale for all selection decisions. In some cases, lower scoring applicants were hired without explanation. In its response, the college agreed to the auditor's recommendations in all areas, including tightening procurement and purchasing and improving transparency and documentation around hirings, promotions, and pay raises. Management acknowledges government auditor recommendations and has committed to the following action plans. Conestoga should enforce mandatory written pre-approvals, prohibit retroactive approvals, and strengthen documentation standards for travel and hospitality expenses, and agrees that strengthening controls around travel and hospitality expenditures will enhance compliance, transparency, and financial stewardship, states the college's response. The auditors also found salary and termination payments went beyond what's allowed and that executives were given pay hikes without proper proof that the extra pay was necessary, and estimated the college spent around $1 million over 6 years in raises for executives alone, despite a provincial freeze on wage hikes. As for Tibbetts, auditors identified 2 post-freeze increases to the president's non-salary compensation terms, a retirement allowance from 12 to 14 months, and a vacation carry forward from the 10-day maximum to 196 banked days. Tibbetts retired suddenly in January, and his package was voted on by the board despite members saying they were not provided any particulars. Last week, the province said the former mayor's payout was equal to 83 times his monthly salary. While recommending seeking legal advice, the auditors said payments made under the president's retirement agreement at the end of employment exceeded the limits established in the executive compensation framework, and the college's calculation may have also overstated the retirement allowance. These conditions created significant compliance and financial exposure, including the potential for overpayments equal to at a minimum, approximately 5 years of salary. When asked if the college can recoup any of the payout, Quinn told reporters at Queen's Park last week that we're looking into all options to see if we can bring the money back where it should have be with the students. The minister has said he believes Conestoga is an outlier, though the auditors do say there are lessons to be learned for all public sector organizations to help reinforce expectations for strong governance and effective internal controls. And Christian Ruscovy is a Toronto-based senior writer covering education for The Star. Our next article is in the Canada section, and it's an explainer. And the title is The Canadian Census is Due Tomorrow, From Filling It Out to the Penalty for Not Doing So. Here's what you need to know. Census data is collected every 5 years by Statistics Canada. The 2026 data collection cycle began on May 4th and is due on Tuesday. And this article is written by Danya Yacob, and that's YAQOOB, who is a staff reporter. The deadline to fill out the 2026 census is Tuesday, and there's a potential penalty if you don't fill it out in time. From coast to coast to coast, many Canadians would have received an invitation to participate in the mandatory national survey. Whether it's your first time filling one out or if you need a refresher since the last census 5 years ago, here's everything you need to know about what the data the government is collecting and how to participate, which every Canadian is required by law to do. What is the 2026 census? The census, run by Statistics Canada, is conducted every 5 years to map how the country is changing. The 2026 census cycle began on May 4th with 2 censuses running, one for households in Canada and the other for farm businesses. The deadline to fill out the census is May 12th. The census of the population collects information about the demographics, society, and economy from each household in Canada. Questions will ask about indicators including age, gender, marital status, and language, StatCan said. 75% of households will receive a short-form census questionnaire, which asks about basic demographic details. The rest of the households will receive the long-form questionnaire, which also seeks information on the social, economic, and dwelling situation of Canadians. The Census of Agriculture seeks to collect information about agriculture businesses in the country in an effort to create an accurate profile of the agriculture sector in Canada. Together, they paint a complete portrait of Canada's population and agriculture sector, providing high-quality information that helps Canadians make important decisions that affect their families, their communities, and their businesses, Statistics Canada says. Is a census mandatory? Yes, participation in the census is mandated by law. All Canadian residents, including citizens, landed immigrants, refugee claimants, Canadian Foreign Service officers, Canadian Armed Forces members stationed abroad, and people who work or study permits in Canada are required to provide data. Anyone who refuses to participate could face a fine of up to $500 under the Statistics Act. If the online questionnaire is not completed by the respondent, a census employee will follow up to help them complete the questionnaire, Statistics Canada said. How do I fill out the census? Each census invitation letter sent to households by mail features a unique 16-digit code for respondents to complete their questionnaire. Respondents can visit census.gcca, and I'll spell that out. It's CENSUS.GC.CA. Click Start Questionnaire, enter the code, and then proceed through the questions Statistics Canada has prepared. Statistics Canada offers the census questionnaire in an alternative format and in 28 different languages for reference purposes. The National Statistics Office has set up a FAQ page to help anyone facing difficulties in filling out the survey. Where does my data go? Census data is used by governments, indigenous communities and organizations, farm organizations, businesses, and others to make informed decisions that benefit individuals, communities, and the country. Both censuses are conducted under the Statistics Act, which guarantees the information provided in the census remains confidential. Results from the 2026 census are expected around 18 months after Census Day. And Danya Yacob is a staff reporter with the Toronto Star. Our next article is under federal politics, and the title is Economic Growth Now Tops Environment as Priority in Energy Policy, Poll Suggests. More Canadians now say economic growth should be a bigger priority in Canada's energy policy than protecting the environment, a new Angus Reid Institute report suggests. And this article is written by David Baxter of the Canadian Press. More Canadians now say economic growth should be a bigger priority in Canada's energy policy than protecting the environment, a new Angus Reid Institute report suggests. The pollster released a report Monday indicating 61% of Canadians now see economic growth as the biggest priority in energy policy. The question offered two options on the top priority shaping federal energy policy: economic growth or environmental protection. That's a shift in public opinion since 7 years ago, when the same question had 55% of Canadians saying the environment should be the top priority in energy policy. The poll suggests almost 2/3 of British Columbians now support the recently approved $4 billion expansion of Enbridge's West Coast natural gas pipeline, with 17% opposing the project. The remaining 22% of respondents say they were not sure. The pollster found 55% support the project nationally, with 17% opposed and 28% not sure. In an interview with the Canadian Press on May 1st, Prime Minister Mark Carney said a new pipeline is more probable than possible. He also said that Canada needs to increase its energy production and exports in a way that addresses emissions, pointing to carbon capture and storage technology. Carney met with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith last week to talk about progress on a deal between two levels of government to advance a proposal to build a new oil pipeline to the Pacific Coast through BC. Smith said after the meeting she was more confident the deal would be completed, while noting there are still some issues to iron out. Those issues include the timeline for Alberta's adoption of a $130 per ton industrial carbon price. Angus Reid collected polling data going back to 2012 on the Northern Gateway pipeline to show opposition to pipeline development has been shrinking in BC. The 2012 poll recorded 57% opposition in the Northern Gateway project, shrinking to 32% opposition in 2025. A potential Alberta-baked pipeline enjoyed 56% support in BC, with 33% opposition, according to an October 2025 Angus Reid poll. More people told Angus Reid this time that the government is taking the right amount of action to get new pipelines built, with 31% agreeing to the level of action was about right, compared to 23% 7 years ago. The number of people saying the government is doing too much declined from 27% in 2019 to 21% in this poll. About half the population maintains the government is doing too little, with 50% of respondents holding that view in 2019 compared to 48% in 2026. The Angus Reid Institute says the online poll was conducted between April 24th and 28th, with 2,360 Canadian adults drawn from the Angus Reid Forum, the agency's poll respondent pool. The Canadian Research Insights Council, an industry organization that promotes polling standards, says online surveys cannot be assigned a margin of error because they do not randomly sample the population. And this report by the Canadian Press was first published May 11th, 2026. Our next article is under Canada, and the title is Canadians on Ship at Center of Hantavirus Outbreak Land in Canada. The MV Honduras arrived just after 6 a.m. local time in the Canary Islands, Spain. And this article is written by the Canadian Press. 4 Canadians who disembarked the cruise ship at the center of a deadly hantavirus outbreak landed Sunday in BC, where they will continue their quarantine. Online plane tracking platform FlightAware says the aircraft carrying the Canadians arrived at the airport in Victoria from Saguenay-Bogotiville, and that's Saguenay Bagotville airport in Quebec. They are to isolate in BC because they have connections with the province, said BC's health officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry. This has undoubtedly been a stressful and difficult experience for the Canadians and everybody aboard the MV Honduras, Henry said at a Sunday news conference. They are undoubtedly looking forward to being back home in Canada, where they can get the care and monitoring they need. The Canadians were among 130 passengers on the MV Honduras who exited the vessel at a port in Tenerife, and that's Tenerife, an island in Spain's Canary Islands early Sunday. They were assessed as asymptomatic before they took off in a plane chartered by the Public Health Agency of Canada and Global Affairs Canada, with support from the Canadian Armed Forces. A PHAC officer ensured public health measures, including masking and physical distancing, were being followed on the flight. They have been following strict isolation protocols on the MV Honduras since early May, when the World Health Organization declared the outbreak on the ship. Henry said when they arrive in British Columbia, they will be taken to their lodgings. The media were unable to gain access to the Canadian Armed Forces Air Base during the stopover in Quebec. PHAC and GAC said in a joint statement Sunday that the passengers are expected to quarantine under supervision for just over 2 weeks in BC. That will bring their total quarantine time to 21 days since May 6th, the last day a confirmed case of hantavirus was on the ship. Health officials will assess the Canadians after that, the statement said, to determine whether their quarantine period needs to be extended to a maximum of 42 days in total since the last possible exposure on board the ship. Henry reassured people there is no risk of hantavirus spread after their arrival. They won't be out in the community. They won't be having contact with people. Our public health teams will be in contact with them every day, she said. We'll make sure that they are safely able to have their mental and physical needs taken care of during that period of time. Henry said the Canadians also did not show any symptoms while they were in quarantine on the ship. So that's reassuring. Henry says that she understands people in the province may be concerned about the spread after their arrival, particularly following the COVID-19 pandemic. I absolutely get that feeling, she said. When I first heard about this, it made my stomach clench, she said about the outbreak on the ship. She said, however, The hantavirus does not spread in the same way as COVID-19 and is not considered a disease with pandemic potential. Hantavirus usually spreads when people inhale contaminated residue of rodent droppings and isn't easily transmitted between people. 3 people have died since the outbreak on the ship began, and 5 passengers tested positive for hantavirus, which can cause life-threatening illness. Several other Canadians have been told to isolate after coming into contact with infected passengers. A couple from the Grey Bruce region of Ontario disembarked from the ship in late April before the outbreak was declared and have shown no symptoms. 4 other Canadians from Quebec, Alberta, and Ontario were not on the ship but may have come into contact with someone infected with hantavirus before while flying, the federal government said. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, and that's Ghebreyesus, sought to reassure the public on Sunday, repeating that the risk for the general public from the outbreak is low. Even so, those disembarking and personnel working at the port of Grenadilla in Tenerife wore protective gear during the evacuation process, including face masks, hazmat suits, and respirators. Video obtained by the Associated Press showed passengers on the tarmac wearing similar suits and being sprayed down with disinfectant. This report by the Canadian Press was first published May 10, 2026. This next article is under sports, and it's an opinion article. Mitch Marner finds elusive playoff success after being run out of town. It's a Toronto tradition. And this article is written by Damien Cox, who's a contributing columnist, and he is a former Star sports reporter who is a current freelance contributing columnist based in Toronto. The Maple Leafs and their fans need to get better at picking scapegoats. Historically, picking on one individual and hanging the latest setback in Toronto hockey on that single person generally hasn't worked out well. The list is long and includes Frank Makovic, Russ Courtnall, Larry Murphy, Paul Maurice, and Freddie Anderson. All went on to greater success and even championships with other teams after being identified by the Leafs faithful as the scapegoat du jour of their particular time in Toronto. Maholovic and Murphy are in the Hall of Fame, and Maurice likely will be one day. Anderson, meanwhile, is taking the Carolina Hurricanes to the Final Four. None were good enough in Toronto, however, or tough enough, or had enough heart, or were capable of performing when it mattered most. The narrative during their final days in blue and white, at least from the standpoint of a noisy part of Leafs Nation, was that if only they could be deleted from the organization, the future would immediately brighten. Well, it looks like you can add Mitch Marner to that list of would-be scapegoats. You know, the guy who just didn't have what it takes to get it done in the Stanley Cup playoffs, the guy who just didn't have the jam to fight through all the nastiness and deliver the goods. Turns out the same fellow is suddenly quite good at getting it done in the playoffs. After his hat trick against Anaheim on Friday night, Marner jumped into the lead among all playoff scorers while skating for the Vegas Golden Knights, his first postseason not skating for the Leafs. Here's a neat little statistic comparison. In 9 playoff seasons with the Leafs, Marner scored 13 goals. In 9 playoff games with Vegas, he already has 6. He has flipped his usual production style in Vegas, delivering a so-so regular season, but in excellent playoffs after having so many good regular seasons in Toronto, but less than Memorial playoffs. Given that the Leafs were horrible without Marner this season, it's fair to say he never was really to blame for the fact that the team underachieved. All he did was play big minutes, run the power play, kill penalties, and be one of the best forwards in the sport. Those who say he never showed up in the playoffs didn't watch the games and just went by whether he scored or didn't score. If you really think the only players who showed up in the playoffs are those that score, you really don't understand this sport. The effort was always there for Marner during his Toronto days. He just couldn't quite figure out the formula to creating superstar level offense in the playoffs, or get the right bounces, or avoid playing against the other team's best defensive players every shift. Well, with Toronto in his rearview mirror, he apparently has now, after playing a lot of center this season, he's a full-time winger again and has found a line mate that complements his style in William Karlsson, and that's Karlsson. People talk about Marner, this, that, and the other. Vegas head coach John Tortorella said, "I never worry about how he feels about it. That's why he's one of the best players around. He's got the proper mindset." Great teams don't just let great talent walk. But did you ever get the feeling the Leafs management and ownership, represented by Keith Pelly, were determined to roll out the red carpet and make sure Marner didn't leave, whatever the cost? Nope. It was a fundamental misreading of an elite talent. First they tried to trade him, then reluctantly tried to sign him, then finally tried to make it seem that he never wanted to stay. Complete mismanagement of a prime asset. At one point, the Leafs owned Marner, Zach Hyman, Austin Matthews, and William Nylander. Marner and Hyman, both local lads, were all but given away to other contending teams. When someone asks you why the Leafs can't win, point to the squandered talents of Marner and Hyman, and there's really not much more to be said. Remember that this summer, when the new GM, John Chayka, and that's Chayka, starts making roster decisions, right now there's no shortage of voices out there suggesting Morgan Rielly's time in Toronto is up, that his poor play last season was a major factor in the team's descent. If the Leafs were actually to learn from their past, they would look upon him as a dedicated veteran fallen into difficult times, and would look for ways to get him back to the level at which he once performed, at which point he would also be a more valuable asset. The only question that should be asked after an unsuccessful season is, how do we get better? In Toronto, however, it's always, who can we blame, and how can we get rid of them? As so many Leafs scapegoats have done in the past, Marner is making the Leafs organization look ridiculous. A Toronto tradition continues. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And our next article is under business, and the title is 5 Things to Watch For in the Canadian Businesses World in the Coming Week. And this article is written by the Canadian Press. And number 1 is Energy Infrastructure Discussion. Trans Mountain Corp Chief Executive Mark Maki, M-A-K-I, and Elizabeth Wademan, Chief Executive of the Canada Development Investment Corp, are at a Canadian Club Toronto event on Monday. They are expected to speak about the energy and infrastructure development. Next, Telecom Conference. The Canadian Telecom Summit will see the industry gather in Toronto on Tuesday and Wednesday. The role of AI is expected to be at the top of mind as Canada's big telecom companies, BEC Incorporated, Rogers Communications Incorporated, and TELUS Corp, and that's TELUS, grapple with how best to use the technology. Next, Bank of Canada. The Bank of Canada will release its summary of deliberations for its April interest rate decision on Wednesday. Michelle Alexopoulos, and that's Alexopoulos, External Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, will also give a speech in Ottawa to the Canadian Association of Business Economics the same day. Home sales. Two key reports on the Canadian housing market are expected this week. The Canadian Real Estate Association is to report its April home sales figures on Thursday, followed by the latest reading on housing starts from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corp on Friday. Economic data. Statistics Canada will release a pair of reports this week offering a look at how the economy performed in March. The agency will release its wholesale trade report on Thursday, followed by its monthly survey of manufacturing on Friday. Our next article in the business section again is an opinion article, and it's how staying in that job you don't love is costing you money. And this article is written by Leslie Ann Scorgie, Scorgie, who's contributing columnist. And Leslie Ann is a Toronto-based personal finance columnist and a freelance contributing columnist for The Star. For many people, the decision to stay in a job they don't love comes down to one thing: the paycheck. You tell yourself you'll hang in there a little longer for the salary, the benefits, the stability, the retirement savings. It's only practical. But over time, that strategy can quietly backfire, working against your financial future. When your work is misaligned, it often shows up in your finances in less obvious ways. You may spread more to cope on convenience, takeout, quick escapes, or things that temporarily lift your mood after a draining day. You may delay pursuing opportunities that would boost your income because you're too exhausted to take action. In some cases, you stay too long and miss the window for meaningful career progression. In other words, the paycheck might be steady, but your financial growth isn't. List all the ways that staying is costing you. Before making any kind of career decision, look beyond your salary. Are you missing raises, bonuses, or skill building opportunities that could increase your income elsewhere? Are you spending more time to manage stress? Are you spending more to manage stress to get to an office that's now too far, or to maintain work-life balance? Are you having to work more, freelance, another job, or extra hours to make ends meet? Even small, repeated spending habits tied to burnout can quietly erode your finances and your mental health. This exercise shifts your mindset from fear-based, I can't leave, to informed, here's what this is costing me, and facts are needed to drive career decisions. If it's clear you've got to move on, start building your financial buffer. Leaving prematurely without another job lined up or savings is risky. Your next step is creating a financial buffer as quickly as possible so you can get out of there. Start by calculating your essential monthly expenses, including housing, food, transportation, your cell phone, and internet. These days, staying connected is essential. What if a recruiter calls? And minimum debt payments. Then work towards setting aside even 1 to 3 months of coverage. If you can get this pot of money even higher, great. Excuse me. Building this reserve fund doesn't have to take years. Redirect money from low value spending, cancel unused subscriptions, and temporarily pause non-essential purchases. Hold that garage sale you've been putting off. Sell the bike you never use. Put your tax refund straight into this fund. This exercise is all about creating just enough breathing room to give yourself options. And in the time it takes to build your buffer, you can test your exit strategy. Perhaps take a course, start networking, and practice interviewing. Reduce financial pressure before making a move. Think of this as getting your financial house in order. Excuse me. Once you're in control, you can alleviate other financial pressures by paying down or consolidating high-interest debt, adjusting discretionary spending, canceling anything unnecessary, negotiating larger costs like insurance, and temporarily increasing savings. If your partner could work more and get paid more, turn that option on. When your financial obligations are higher, you're less likely to jump into the first job opportunity out of urgency. This strategy will allow you to be selective, often leading to a better decision. Use AI to sharpen your positioning. Today's job market rewards clarity and precision. This is where AI can give you an edge. Use it to refine your resume, tailor your cover letters, and identify the keywords that matter most in your field. You can even simulate interview questions to prepare stronger, more confident responses. The goal with using AI is to assist you in presenting your value more effectively and save time in that process. You're stressed enough already. You can then update your LinkedIn headline to reflect where you're going, not just your current role. Use your summary to clearly communicate your strengths, results, and areas of interest. Add measurable achievements to your experience. Stay active on LinkedIn while you're looking. Engage with content, share insights, and connect with people in roles that align with your goals. Opportunities often come through visibility, not just applications. Take your time evaluating each opportunity, especially the compensation given the staggering expensive economy we live in, so you don't accidentally jump into another terrible situation. Align your work to build wealth. In many cases, when your work aligns with your strengths and values, you're more engaged and more productive, leading to stronger income and/or other valuable benefits such as spending less, trying to compensate for stress and dissatisfaction. Over time, that combination creates a powerful financial advantage. Hanging in there can make sense for a season. Maybe when you've got young kids and simply can't take anything more on, but it shouldn't become your long-term strategy if you want to continue to build your career and financial stability. This next article is under GTA, and the title is Inside This Toronto NICU, Mother's Day Means the World to the Parents of These Very Tiny Babies. At Sunnybrook Hospital, which treats more premature babies than any other in Canada, mothers experience joy and heartbreak. And this article is written by Mark Coley, Colley, who is a staff reporter. Laken Knight is spending his 7th week at Sunnybrook Hospital, swaddled in a blanket and lying in an incubator in the neonatal intensive care unit. He has a feeding tube in his mouth and nasal prongs up his nose. He's equipped with heart, oxygen saturation, and respiratory monitors, and his incubator is heated to save the calories he would otherwise have to burn keeping himself warm. Laken weighs just over 3.5 pounds. On March 18th, when he was born 14 weeks premature, he weighed only 1.6 pounds. On a nearby door are certificates of the milestones he has hit so far: his first feed, his first time opening his eyes, his first skin-to-skin cuddle. For first-time parents Brianna and William, both 37, no accomplishment has been too small to celebrate. Growing and breathing, William says, it's very small, but it means everything. The past 7 weeks have been a mix of terror, uncertainty, and joy for the Knights, who live 2 hours north of North Bay. Brianna gave birth at 26 weeks after developing HELLP syndrome and being flown to Sunnybrook for a C-section. And Sunday, amidst it all, is Brianna's first Mother's Day. For anyone who walks through these NICU doors, Mother's Day means something a little different. Families come from all over Ontario to the Sunnybrook NICU, which it says treats more babies born before 26 weeks than any other hospital in Canada. Some are born here, others, in need of more intensive care than their local hospital can provide, are transferred from elsewhere in the province. Eventually, most are transferred back as they grow. Colleen Rocha, Rocha, treats babies as they get older. A nurse in the hospital's neonatal follow-up clinic, Roka, describes her job as the best in the world, getting to watch vulnerable babies small enough to fit comfortably in her hand, wrists so thin a wedding ring can be worn as a bracelet, grow and thrive. Roka, 60, laughs easily and walks with confidence. She's earned it. She's worked as a NICU nurse for 3.5 decades, at one point leading the team at Sunnybrook. 3 years ago, she moved to the neonatal follow-up clinic where she checks in on babies until they're a year past what would have been their delivery date. It's an easier job than the one she had in the NICU, she says. There, alongside the beautiful and joyous moments, she also saw some of the worst. Taking a baby out of the incubator for a final cuddle, holding hands with a parent as they say goodbye, sending a baby to sick kids, knowing they will never come back. Once, the NICU lost 4 babies, two sets of twins in one day. You're fighting, Roka says, and you lose. She learned to mask her feelings during 12-hour shifts, understanding the grief was not hers and she still had a job to do. But when the day ended with a meal in the lounge or a drive home, Roka cried. At a certain point, it became too much. You really get to a point where you just kind of break, she says. And when you're crying harder than the family, that's no good. That's your best before date. Instead of retiring, Roka moved to the follow-up clinic. Once a week, she shares a photo with the NICU nurses of an older baby returning to the clinic as a thank you for their work. Rocha is the mother herself with 2 sons and a daughter in their early 30s. Each of her gray hairs, she jokes, is from them. Having kids helped her to understand the magnitude of her job. They give me my reason every day to wake up and do my thing, she says. Sitting at her desk, her first stethoscope hanging on the wall behind her, she says she never wants to leave this place. Her team is kind and caring and giving and smart, wicked smart. When she does leave, she jokes, it will be kicking and screaming. She mimes a version of her last day, clinging to her desk as she gets pulled away. Then she laughs. This place, she says, is something special. The nights, watching in their room as little Lincoln wriggles in his incubator, feel that. Brianna and William were terrified their first days in the NICU. It was jarring to see Lincoln covered in wires, they say, and every alarm brought a feeling of helplessness. These months have brought uncertainty, too. They are 6 hours due south from home in Kennebec, Ontario, far from family and in a city they don't know well. They spend a week in the hotel before landing at the Ronald McDonald House, where they can get meals and do their laundry. Nurses have told the Knights they should expect to be in hospital until Lincoln's original due date of late June. Amidst the uncertainty, there's the joy of parenthood. Brianna and William hold Lincoln skin to skin every day, a feeling Brianna can't quite describe. Her love for Lincoln is unconditional, she says. To me, he's already perfect in any way. So many people say you have no idea what it's like to feel love until you have a child, Brianna says. Now that she's had one, she gets it. In the incubator, labeled with a piece of tape as Prince Lincoln's New Castle, Lincoln naps with his hand outstretched. He's getting bigger every day. Brianna and William have no fancy plans for Mother's Day other than a dinner someplace in town. The rest of the day, they'll be here at Sunnybrook in a dimly lit room with a hum of medical machinery watching Lincoln grow. And Mark Coley is a Toronto-based general assignment reporter for The Star. You can reach him at his email, which is mcolley@symbol THESTAR.ca. Our next article is under provincial politics, and the title is Fort Government Adds to Health Treatments Available from Pharmacists. Ontario is giving pharmacists more powers to provide vaccinations, including tetanus and shingles shots, and treat common ailments such as head lice and the fungal infection jock itch. And starting in July, participating pharmacies in Ontario will be able to provide vaccinations for pertussis, diphtheria, pneumonia, and RSV. And this article is written by Rob Ferguson of the Queen's Park Bureau. Ontario is giving pharmacists more powers to provide vaccinations, including tetanus and shingles shots, and treat common ailments such as head lice and the fungal infection jock itch. The changes Monday from Health Minister Sylvia Jones continue a trend of allowing pharmacists to provide more treatments previously limited to doctors as the province grapples with a shortage of physicians and overcrowded emergencies room. Today's announcement continues our progress to reduce wait times and let more of our province's healthcare professionals work to the full extent of their expertise. Starting in July, participating pharmacies will also be able to provide vaccinations for pertussis, diphtheria, pneumonia, and RSV, the respiratory syncytial virus. 9 more common ailments are being added to the scope of practice for pharmacists, such as calluses and corns, dandruff, dry eye, mild headaches, nasal congestion, ringworm, and warts. More ailments will be added to the list next year, bringing the number of conditions pharmacists can treat to 33, Jones said at the University of Toronto School of Pharmacy, which has a 3-year Doctor of Pharmacy program. The changes make it easier for patients to access care close to home, said Justin Bates, Chief Executive of the Ontario Pharmacists Association. Since pharmacists' scope of practice was first increased in 2023, Ontarians have notched more than 2.4 million visits for care, Jones told reporters. NDP leader Marit Stiles said the changes are doing little to ease overcrowding in the healthcare system where patients are being treated in hospitals, hallways, and in storage closets. While he supports healthcare professionals working at their full scope of practice, Liberal MPP Adil Shamni, and that's SHAMJI, of Don Valley East, an emergency room physician, said the province should be tracking vaccinations through a central registry. He noticed pharmacists will be getting paid from the public purse for doing something they already do for free, pointing customers to the over-the-counter treatments and question if they will properly diagnose a condition like jock itch, an infection of the groin area involving an itchy red rash. If I was seeing someone in my clinic, I'd ask them patients questions, and then I might have to do an examination, Samji said. I don't know that I see that necessarily happening in the pharmacy clinics. Jones said the government is considering increases to the scope of practice for other regulated health professionals, such as dental hygienists, denturists, and speech-language pathologists. They include allowing optometrists to disperse some topical medications and manage open-angle glaucoma, and allowing chiropractors and physiotherapists to order diagnostic ultrasounds. And Rob Ferguson is a Toronto-based reporter covering Ontario politics for The Star. Our last article today is under City Hall, and the title is Longtime CTV Journalist to Run for Toronto City Council Seat. Natalie Johnson confirms weeks of speculation will run to become next councillor for Beaches East York. And this article is written by Mandis Habanina, and that's Habibina of the City Hall Bureau. Longtime CVT journalist Natalie Johnson is throwing her hat in the ring to become the next councillor for Beaches East York. Johnson, who is on leave, is running to replace Brad Bradford, who is looking to replace Olivia Chow as Toronto's mayor. Until now, Johnson has kept her plans close to the chest, but the announcement Monday, when she also plans to register as a candidate, confirms weeks of speculation. It does feel like a big leap, frankly, Johnson told the Star at her home on the Eastern Lakeside ward. I've chosen to effectively walk away from my dream job to try something new that I think I will make a difference. Johnson said when she was a kid helping her school fundraise, she'd be the only one at recess who didn't take a prize after the event. Her parents had told her never to do something good in order to get something in return. It's a lesson, she said, underlines her decision to run for the empty council seat. It's not about the power of the paycheck, she continued, sipping coffee from a mug gifted to her from her husband with the words, "You are DEER, dear, to me," next to a deer on it. She's a fan of dad jokes, it turns out. I think the residents of this ward will feel disconnected from City Hall. In many ways, Johnson continued. I think they absolutely want a seat at the table. Johnson, 39, started her political reporting in Ottawa with CTV nearly 2 decades ago. She moved in 2010 to Toronto, where she's reported on municipal affairs ever since, including several elections and by-elections. She said at no point did she seriously consider being on the other side of them until a month ago. Rob Duffy, CTV News communications manager, said it in a statement that the network removed Johnson from any on-air or editorial duties after she told them she was considering running for council. James Dan is among those vying for the seat as well. He told the Star last week that as a former municipal employee, he knows how the sausage gets made and how to actually get things accomplished. Johnson, who's originally from rural eastern Ontario, said she has always covered Toronto's local issues with care and compassion, but always also a certain level of detachment at first. But the longer I lived here, the more I began personally rooting for the city to get it right, she said. I wasn't just covering the issues, I was living them. She said it was raising her 3 sons, ages 4, 6, and 8, in Beaches, East York, that opened her eyes to the many ways the city could work better. She pointed to several quality of life issues, such as taking a stroller down a clear sidewalk weeks after snowfall, taking her kids on the subway without worrying for their safety, and moving around the ward or connecting to other parts of Toronto without debilitating traffic. Johnson is a board member at the Community Center 55, which organizes various kids and seniors programs and offers financial support for families that couldn't otherwise afford them. She's also on the board of Beaches Sandbox, a local community hub offering the same type of programs. Johnson emphasized she's intent on staying away from political ideology, both in her campaign and as a counselor, adding she feels she can work with anyone. When asked whether she would welcome an endorsement from Bradford or Chow, Johnson said she's unsure. I think endorsements from community leaders are far more valuable, she said. Johnson said her journalism career has given her the skills she thinks would make her a strong candidate. It's not just the ability to dig through the city data, break down budgets, and understand the bureaucracy, she said, but also as a reporter, she's wired to listen to people. While she said her journalism has affected change, she feels like this is an opportunity to make a more direct difference. This feels like a put me in coach moment, she said. And Mandis Habayana is part of the Star City Hall Bureau based in Toronto, and you can reach her at her email, which is mhabibinnia at symbol THESTAR.ca. And you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the May 11th, 2026 issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Judy, that's me, and it has been such a pleasure and honor to read to all of you. I hope you take care of your amazing selves and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for listening.